Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling. Shall we see what's going on a lovely island of Fawnhallow? Today I've got hair in my mouth. Certainly the deficit of having, well, I'm not sure if a deficit is really the right word, but a shortcoming of having such long hair. When it goes into your mouth, you're just like, what's going on? Anywho, yeah, what should we chat about today? I mean, we can talk about hair, why not? I don't really have much to say about hair or anything. And apologies if I'm distracted, I'm playing some shiny colours on the other monitor. We've got the live tour, Fest Tours, is that what it's called? I forgot what this event's called. Back, and it hasn't been back for ages, so I'm just sort of knocking it out, you know, early on into my break while I'm relaxing. But hello everyone, right now in Fawnhallow, it's 5:38 PM on Saturday, December 21st, 2024. It's really wild playing this game mode. No, but the one I'm playing in shiny colours, because it is all in Japanese, and it initially came out like years ago, a year or two ago or something. I would say it's kind of a take on a roguelike, except for it's not honestly that amazing or anything like that. You might be like, why am I playing it? You know, it's just like easy work while I'm doing something else. I appreciate the design space of a game, which is something which is easy to do while doing something else. But it's also a little bit strange because it's a game which is all in Japanese, like all the instructions are in Japanese. I'm not fluent enough in Japanese to actually understand what some of the things do, like what some power-ups do or whatever, but I have like there's a certain joy, I suppose, to be had by trying to figure out how something works, by experimenting, I suppose, with it. And therein lies, I suppose, a big part of the fun, being like, ooh, I don't know what this will do, but trying to do this is a sort of interesting way to try and figure it out. What I do need to do though is I need to remake some of the units on this team for it. I've slowly remade some of the units now stronger because power creep in this game. Units are a lot stronger than they were when I initially made this team like a year ago or something. Anyway, but yeah, but there's a lot of joy I think in I don't know if this is probably not a very common experience, and I can't imagine it could possibly be a common experience. But if you've never tried it, I would recommend it, like here and there. It's surprisingly fun, but playing a game in a language you don't speak or a language you don't know and trying to figure out how to beat it or how to get even close to beating it, there's a very interesting, in my opinion, sort of a draw to it. Sort of being like, it's like a puzzle to be solved, you know. It's kind of like a bit of a joy of discovery of playing Witness the first time. You know, and trying to be like, how exactly do I solve this puzzle? What are the mechanics behind this? Who knows? But part of the draw is the fact that you have the ability to try and sort of find what's going on, and therein lies the fun of it. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you get to a level of sort of like muscle memory of a game, where it's sort of just like, oh, you can play this game basically with your eyes closed. Okay, not with your eyes closed. Even that's a bit extreme, but you know. I touched upon this a little bit when I was talking about like redesigning from placeholder art, but like I feel like this happens mostly, well, unsurprisingly mostly in roguelites or similar sort of games which have this not repetitive, but a gameplay loop of a similar pattern which you repeat, is what I mean to say. Like, I feel like repetitive has negative connotations here, which I didn't want to imply, but the sort of vibe. And it's how I get when I play, you know, is sometimes you play the game and you're just like, oh, this has like a familiar pattern, and whenever this particular pattern of colours and shapes appear on my screen while playing this game, I immediately know what this means, and then you can sort of do it instinctively. You know exactly what you're going to do, you know exactly what it means, you know exactly what to click, even if you don't intuitively, in this case, know the language. I don't necessarily know exactly what it will or might be doing, you know how to interface with it enough that you can go through, and it's almost like a level of expertise. That's the interesting part, because I don't know why the game that came to mind, which I feel like might exemplify this most, might be like Slave Aspire or something, because I mean it's a card-based roguelike. I feel like is the creme de la creme of that sort of type of, I don't know, saying a type of gameplay seems misleading, but type of play where you're doing it and everything is just so automatic. Because once a roguelike, you play it hundreds of times probably, going through different iterations, but you play it, eventually you presumably get to a point where you're so good at it that things in it become very much second nature to you, right? You look at a card and you don't even need to like read. You might not even know what the name of a card is or anything like that. You probably might just know what the visual art is, or just like the vague colours on it. But as soon as you see those colours, it triggers a response in your brain being like, oh, this is, I don't know, give 7 block or something. See, this is why I find it strange that I chose Slay the Spire as my game of choice, because I haven't played Slay the Spire, so I don't really know much about it. I might give a second one a shot, I will say, because like the first one's so like well renowned, I'm like, I might as well at some point. Anyway, long and short, is that it? I think it is more exemplified in card games because there's often a very visual element which goes along with them, but the sort of pattern recognition in the human brain, it really is quite incredible sometimes, to the extent it goes to, which is why I'm just saying, like, you can just see like the patterns of, I don't know, like red and yellow in a certain combination, and instinctively in your brain you have it memorized as this is an effect which does this or whatever. It's going to be interesting when Slay the Spire 2 comes out with all its new updated art, whether people would just be like, I don't have that muscle memory anymore. I was thinking about this when I was doing some Star Rail, Honkai Star Rail earlier today. I was doing their roguelite equivalent, which is called the Simulated Universe. And the thing I was doing was like, I never really paid attention, but like the blessings you can get, which are effectively the items you can get in that game, all have like names to them. And it was just we one of the runs, I was just like, oh yeah, I just kind of like noticed one of the names, and then I thought about it being like, I don't really know what most of the names are. Excuse me, for the blessings. And it's not like they have much of a visual element. Yeah, it's not like those cards have much of like a photo to go along with it to be like, this exemplifies the visual element or whatever's going on. Instead it's just sort of like, how would I best put it? I'm not really sure how I'd put it, but it just, you memorize it, I guess, by the shape of water. No, the shape of the text, I guess, is how I describe it. Like, I look at the text and be like, oh, it kind of looks like this, and then in my mind somehow that triggers, and I'm just like, oh, I know exactly what this card is. Does that make any sense? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, I don't really know, but it's strange to think about that, but like how far the memorization of things goes. It goes so far to the extent of being like, hey, look, you just, even the shape of a text is enough to tell you exactly how, what, who, what this card is. And isn't that strange? How easily ingrained into our psyche, our memory, that these effects are. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or anything, I'm just saying it's a very curious thing. It's perhaps a better way to put it. Just how quickly you can sort of pick up on these things in your mind when you're just sort of playing the game, and it would just like trigger that effect in your mind. You'd be like, oh, that's what that is. Even if it, I don't know if it like ever bleeds out like into other games. I think the most interesting, I suppose, consequence of it is when you interpret something wholly incorrectly. That's one where I'm just like, that's crazy, because that happened a lot in Hearthstone, I think, because obviously you're playing like with these cards, which are very small, sort of like ovals, on your screen. There's only like so much that you can see from them, but from them you can make your own guesses, interpretations of what each of them are, what each of them mean, and from that, it, if you end up grossly misinterpreting what one of the pictures are, like I've done for quite a few of the cards, it sort of locks it into your mind in a different way, and when it, like, you see the full zoomed out art, you're just like, what is this card? Or when someone like just says a name or describes it, I don't know, it completely rattles you, because you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Because I'm sure there are people out there who are more visual, there are people out there who are less visual. I would consider myself probably more on the visual side, but of how I learn things, but at the same time, it's sort of like a at the same time, I'm just sort of like, how do I put it? But there are other people out there who presumably don't learn things as visually. They learn it through like with text or something. So they've probably like memorized all the card names. But like so many of the card names, like, at least in Hearthstone I do know. But it's curious in Star Wars, I basically know none of them. I know one of the effect items, which is the one that prompted it because I was reading it and being like, huh. I never realised that this had this name. It was the card effect. I can't remember. It's a card effect, which I know what it does. Is basically you break someone's weakness, and then it also does like equivalent break to targets next to it, and it's called like Hell is Other People. I mean, I looked like that card name just for like noticing it for the first time and being like, huh, I never realised this had a card name like this. If anything, and just made me think like I don't know if I can name a single other like blessing name. I remember them by the symbol they see and then the shape of the description, and then in my mind I'm like, oh, I know what that is, which is crazy because I haven't even played Simulator Universe that much. Divergent Universe, which is what I was playing, I was trying to do all the achievements, which I did do. I was sort of just like, this is even more of a curiosity because I haven't played this mode all that much, but I still have some sort of level of muscle memory in there. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is pattern recognition while you're playing games is so very curious and peculiar, isn't it? Is it not? Which is how easily these things can sort of get lodged into your brain, and even more so lodged wrong. It's like you're learning. I don't know why I'm getting so technical, but it's like the key index pairs or something, except for the key you associated with it is not even necessarily remotely true for what it stands for. But still, that muscle memory remains. It still stays. And from that, like, I don't know, whatever sort of judgments you may have for or against something when you're playing a game, I don't mean like in an opinion-based way. Oh, maybe an opinion-based way, but when you're just like trying to make these judgment calls as you're playing the game, being like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to play this, I'm looking for this card, that sort of thing. You're basically playing an entire different game in your mind. Does that make sense? Because like you're interpreting it so differently in your mind to how it might necessarily be. But you've basically made up your own mind of what the visuals should look like. And that's fascinating. Well, I find that fascinating. Maybe you don't find that fascinating, but but yeah. Anyway, to bring it back full circle is when I was playing Shiny Colours and doing it, and I was just like, I know what the event space is, and I know you click on it and then like an event pops up, except for I've never actually properly sat down to read what the event effects actually are or what my options might do. I just remember, oh, this one is a heal, this one I think gives me items, this one like increases my tension, which is just like a buffs something, is perhaps how I describe it. And it's just fascinating, I think, to be able to interact with it in a way which is, I'm not sure false is the right way to describe it, but it's like I'm interacting with a different version of it in my mind, when instead of like, I don't know, this message being like, oh, you go to a cafe to get some coffee and it restores your stamina, in my mind it's like, oh, this is a one where it says coffee and I have no idea what the rest of it is, but in my mind it's solidified as heal yourself, coffee, or go to park, heal yourself. That's one of the actual ones. What's the actual description? I don't know, but I find that fascinating. It's like a mirror version, an anti-version of a game exists solely in your mind, and that's the one you choose to interface, well, not choose to interface with, because I guess that makes it sound a lot more voluntary than probably actually is. It's more like that is the one you interface with because it's how you learnt it, it's how you interacted with it, it's how you understand it, and that's not a bad thing. It just is a very curious thing, perhaps, that can even happen. I don't know if I'm really describing it, what I'm trying to say properly. Just this concept of, I guess, you know, it's kind of along the same lines of, you know, how art, a lot of it is based on your interpretation of it. as I often say, half of it is artist intention, half of it is arty, that's not the right word, but part of a consumer's interpretation, as it should be, you know. The life experiences that we don't necessarily have life experiences in common, and the life experiences that you have will shape how you perceive things compared to how I might perceive things. And with that allows a whole sort of broader spectrum of perspectives when it comes to the media property you are ingesting or participating in, because now you can interface it from a different perspective, because there's like, oh, this different experience that I've had makes me view this in a different way, makes me view this character in a different way. So it's kind of like building upon that, except for instead of it being on a narrative sense, which I usually talk about when I talk about that, it's now instead in like a mechanical sense. These mechanics I'm interfacing with on a different level. Not on a different level as in like a higher level, but more like I'm interfacing it on in a different way entirely compared to what might be expected, what might be usual. And that gives a whole new depth, I think, to games in the first place, because everyone's interpretation of a game might be mildly different in their mind. You know, because you might say these things don't matter, and I think, like on a grand scale thing, of course they don't, but I mean like on a smaller scale things, like maybe, like let's take Slave Spire for example. You interpret visually one of the cards wrong. You like what it's meant to be is meant to be like the ironclad, I don't know, slashing with their sword or something, but you've interpreted it as just sort of standing firm with a sword. That gives you a small, minute, probably imperceptible difference into the interpretation of Ironclad as a character, whether her artist wanted to portray them as maybe like battle ready and that sort of thing, like always on top form when it comes to combat, but then you've interpreted them instead as like a steadfast warrior fighter, you know, maybe even reluctant a little bit, because we make our own interpretations upon the small things we see and make our own judgments. So maybe you interpret that in a completely different way, and that in itself is fascinating because it's built up a different version of a character in your mind and can completely subvert things. And it's even crazier when you do get that realization of, oh, this character was intended to be like portrayed in a different way to how I interpreted it. Because a lot of times, like, it's completely fine if it doesn't cause any sort of like dissonance between your interpretation and the actual quote-quote interpretation, and that's fine, that's just how it is. But there are times where it can cause a difference. Like one time I can think of recently in Genshin Impact, my favourite NPC in my game, cherished, who is, I don't know, it's kind of complicated. She's like a flower sprite who is very arrogant, kind of full of herself, and wanted to basically have like a sort of martyr complex where she sacrifices herself for the good of her community, because that's what it traditionally should have been, like in the scriptures or whatever. But then, like, by the end of the story, it like subverts all of that, where she realizes that this sort of high and mighty thing is not necessarily as high and mighty as she seems it to be. And in my mind, her voice was always very haughty and very sort of arrogant, and perhaps even posh and everything. And then she came, she got voiced in like one of the recent events in Genshin Impact, and she has a very, how I describe it, sort of like young gremlin-y voice. And I was just like, whoa, it was like whiplash. I was just like, whoa, this character I've interpreted in one way actually has a completely different portrayal to what I was expecting. Is it bad? No, not necessarily. But it did just make, like, shake me up for a second, being like, whoa, why does this character sound like this? Instead of it sounding like how I interpreted it to sound like. And the answer is just, that is what it is. Because that's what the intention always was. At the end of the day, it was my own intention. Faulty is the wrong word, which was different, I suppose. Anyway, isn't that interesting? Maybe it's not. But on that note, I'm going to round this episode off here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Day Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.